Hi, I'm Julia Kirby here at the Global Peter Drucker Forum, and today I'm in conversation with Brian Solis, who's the head of global innovation at ServiceNow, and we're going to be talking about the impact of AI and possibly other factors on knowledge workers. So the theme of the conference this year is the next knowledge work. And of course that was a hark back to Peter Drucker himself, who coined the term knowledge work and knowledge workers. But the next in our title kind of more than suggests that maybe we're entering a whole new era of knowledge work that maybe Peter Drucker could never have envisioned. And but it opens up a lot more questions than it gives answers, and so we're here getting answers from people like you. So my first question for you, Brian, and welcome, by the way, is just what is your take on what has disrupted, if anything, knowledge work and knowledge workers? What's most responsible if there's a shift going on in their lives?
There's two, and I think one would surprise you, and one won't. And I'll save the one that won't for next. The one that might surprise you is disinformation on the internet and social media, and the pervasiveness of mobile smartphones in our lives. TikTok, Instagram, Reels, the distractibility, the speeding up of life itself, and the difficulty of telling what's true or what's not true. It's resetting baselines and it's rewiring brains. And when you then move to the second bit, which is artificial intelligence or generative AI specifically, you either compound the worst of us or you could compound the best of us. And without leadership, it's a crapshoot. But I believe that with leadership, we can steer the next era of knowledge work and knowledge workers in an era of the greatest productivity we've ever seen, the greatest effectiveness we've ever seen, not just efficiency, and also the ability to augment that work in ways that we didn't even know were possible.
Yeah, that augmentation as opposed to automation, that seems to be a very important theme that we're hearing in the discussion around AI and knowledge workers. Maybe you can expand a little more on maybe an example where you've seen augmentation. I know you meet a lot of clients and have seen a lot of case studies.
I do. I work with a lot of companies at ServiceNow where this is not meant to be a plug, but we have an AI platform for business transformation. And when you talk about business transformation, you're not just talking about one department, one workflow. You're talking about an entire organization that needs to reimagine itself for an AI-first world. And what that looks like is part automation, but automation is taking what you did yesterday's work, and making it more efficient for tomorrow. Augmentation, though, is unlocking what you didn't do yesterday or what you didn't know you could do yesterday and building more effectiveness around new types of outcomes, creating new value. And that augmentation is what's going to lead to innovation, which is really the catalyst behind business transformation. So an example of augmentation could be, I call it an exoskeleton, cognitive exoskeleton, because every experiment that you do, whether it's prompting or whether it's any form of multimodal input, you challenge yourself. You imagine opportunities in the unknown space or in uncertainty to try to get to outcomes you couldn't have done by yourself. So an example of that personally, for example, would be if I'm cooking with some ingredients that are in the fridge and I don't want to go to the store, I might take a picture of some tomatoes, maybe some olive oil, maybe some chicken, and ask, a normal ask of ChatGPT or you name your favorite tool, what can I cook with these ingredients? But then I could get more creative and say, what could I cook with these ingredients within 15 minutes? Or what can I cook with these ingredients within 15 minutes at so many calories? Or if I want to start augmenting that capability, what can I cook for myself today in the style of Bobby Flay, tomorrow in the style of you name your favorite chef, Emeril Lagasse, and what you're doing now is giving yourself the capability in real time to perform in ways that you couldn't do yesterday, beyond a cookbook. And if you play that type of example out in work, tell me how to write a speech in the style of Steve Jobs' Stanford address. You're now going to have a partner, a collaborator, who can keep helping you up-level your engagement.
And so within organizations, how is this going to change? What will change in terms of how knowledge work is organized?
I think one of the themes that I heard here consistently is that we have to re-engage the soft skills in work, but that doesn't come naturally. If we think about the words of Sir Ken Robinson, creativity, soft skills in general have been sort of taught out of us. You know, we're rewarded by how well we follow the rules, and those rules are pretty rigid. And innovation and things like Gen AI are actually saying bend those rules or break those rules. And so what we need is a new genre of leadership to essentially inspire play, inspire imagination, inspire curiosity, inspire experimentation, where work becomes a safe space for doing the things that we technically didn't do or weren't allowed to do before. But I also think it has to go further than that. I think human resources and leadership combined need to rethink incentivization, reward systems for helping people act outside of their comfort zones so that they can create new comfort zones. And also with accountability, I think Drucker talked about that, you know, we can't manage others if we can't manage ourselves first. And that level of self-awareness needs to start with us. We can't expect others to figure this out. We have to actually challenge ourselves to think about what's different, what the future could look like, and how these tools can help us unlock potential, help us find certainty and uncertainty, and have fun and bring it back and encourage people to interact with these tools in ways that they don't just get comfortable, but they become empowered to do great things that they couldn't achieve before.
And much of your thinking lately has been at this sort of leadership level, and you called your book Mindshift, and it sounds like what you've been describing, is that the definition of the mind shift that's required? How would you put it into a nutshell? What are we moving from, and what are we moving to in terms of mindsets?
It's certainly partial, driven by AI, but it's really going back to things like 2016 election, all of the wild climate activity that's happened around the planet, 2022's launch of ChatGPT, 2024 election. We've had so many wild events that no one would have predicted that forced us to react. And when we reacted, we might have reacted with newness. I call it the novel economy. It's inspired by the novel coronavirus, because novel itself just means new and unusual. There's no playbook for it. And so the idea was, let's create a new playbook. Let's take advantage of these challenges and turn them into opportunities and change our trajectory, use it for the better. But what we ended up doing was taking all of this disruption and putting it back into the box of business as usual. For example, return to work is us going back to normal now that things have settled down. Putting rules and regulations and governance around AI is us putting it in the box of business as usual until we figure things out. Nothing wrong with that. But the book Mindshift is really about being self-aware to the point where you allow yourself to ask different questions, like what if or what about. And there's a framework in the book that helps you keep up with these disruptions, to help you actually get ahead of these disruptions, to analyze them, to think about it, to scenario plan around them in ways that you can bring back into the organization, in ways that you can inspire others to have a mind shift, to see how they can use these as opportunities, not just for the betterment of the company, but the betterment of themselves, so that everyone together can reshape the future in a way that's better for everyone.
And I assume that much of this is about bringing to light or bringing to the surface some buried assumptions and then dispensing with them, or at least challenging them.
Absolutely challenging them is part of the framework. And that's the thing about it, is that every time I've been involved in every technological revolution going back to the 90s, and consistently in that work, it has always been business as usual. Think about the internet. Websites are still horrible today. Think about e-commerce. Still not the best experience. Mobile comes along, and most companies just took their existing web presence and adapted it to the phone, rather than creating a TikTok like that revolutionized how we interact with information. And so that leadership framework hasn't kept up with the speed and the impact of technology and all of the other disruptions in life. And so, yes, we're not just challenging assumptions, we're actually rebuilding models, we're rebuilding mental models, we're rebuilding discipline in ways that are fun, but also that are helpful to you and everyone else.
So I've been talking to you as the thinker behind a very thoughtful book, but you're also a practitioner. You're a business leader yourself at ServiceNow. You run this network of centers focused on innovation. What has all this meant for you? Like, did you write the book based on what you learned in experience, or have you thought about it theoretically and then applied it?
It's been inspired by a lot of work with the companies that we work with, because they're asking, like everybody here is asking, about AI. And I think about Drucker's point about communication in terms of listening for what's not said. And some of the greatest opportunities in these conversations with executives is really driven by what they're not asking and what they're not talking about. And I can use those as opportunities to expand an engagement, to expand how they're thinking about transformation, to expand the opportunity to not just keep up with change, but to get ahead of change. And what inspired me from those conversations were what it took to get someone to recognize the opportunity and not see it as, or not discount it, or see it as something like we can't do. If you think about anytime you've talked to somebody about change, they'll find every reason why they can't do it. But those lessons are what drove this. And then it's also 30 years of futurist frameworks into practice, and also how I was able to get people to open their minds and get other people to come along to drive change.
I love the line you used about from Drucker about listening for what's not being said. You know, it reminds me of the famous Sherlock Holmes story in which his insight comes from the dogs who are not barking as
Yes.
being the biggest clue. So I guess we'll end here. I mean, we're not quite at the end, but I'm going to give you time to. Is there somebody you'd give a shout out to in terms of the people that you talked to and the companies you studied who really get it in terms of the mind shift that you think is happening? Or if you don't want to name names, is there a pattern in terms of what kinds of companies are getting it faster than others?
Well, I'll say the pattern. Although one of the stories I told yesterday on stage was about IKEA's transformation and their experimentation with their Billy chatbot and how they reskilled agents into interior designers to drive net new business for the company, and it was an example of automation and augmentation. I found that to be a wonderful example of what's promising. If we come back to the Sherlock Holmes example, the dogs that are not barking, I would have to say the dogs that are not barking are those that are champions for augmentation and instead accepting that automation is the path forward. It is a path forward, but in the seconds we have left, I want everyone to think about this, and whomever you have an opportunity to influence to think about this. Automation creates efficiency, and it takes you on a linear growth path, which is great. It's historically proven, and especially if you're a company driven by quarter-to-quarter results, you need to do this. But if everybody does that, that's the new baseline, and that's the new status quo, and so you're not really using AI in an innovative way. But if you augment and you experiment and you find things that hit, like that IKEA example, you create a new trajectory line. And so as long as you're automating, effectiveness now starts to unlock new opportunities for growth. And the delta between those two is disruption. And that's the opportunity for us, and that's the competitive advantage.
Brilliant note to end on. Thank you, Brian Solis. It's been a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.